In other news, as the world grapples with looming tariffs from the United States of America come August the 1st, the Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation is hosting a seminar to look at the current geopolitics. President Cyril Ramaphosa, special envoy in North America, Mcebisi Jonas, will also be part of the proceedings. Let's take you live to one of those panels.
With contemporary kind of expressions of organized crime and corruption, which I think where we need to develop further capability. So I think that was a great question, Eva.
Okay, so let me touch on, again, two thematics that came out. I think the first is technologies are exceedingly important in industrialization. I think we've also got to recognize where our strengths and weaknesses lie as a country. We're probably going to be very well served going up a notch or three on technology partnerships and tech transfers, which I know something government does try and encourage and accelerate. But I think many would-be tech investors and or transfer partners do find the administrative burden a downside, and I think we're going to have to, as a matter of course, improve the ease of doing business and attracting investors anyway, which is something we're working towards, but perhaps not quite getting the sweet spot at the moment. So I think that should be an area of focus. How do we make it more seamless and easier for technology transfer partners to come into the country? Are our institutions in Africa fit for purpose? And it's a very complex question with an equally complex answer. I think probably very few would disagree here if we said that some of the institutions, if I have a look at Africa Continental Free Trade Area, it's not getting the speed and acceleration we need. And because we've had on this panel certainly a trade discussion, I think that we need to place greater emphasis, focus, resource capacity on the FTA. It's such a critical element to growth on the continent, and it's a great pity. It pains me, as we sit here, Commissioner, it pains me that we are not, perhaps as a continent, giving it the right focus. Thanks.
Yo, Sizwe.
That's the title of this panel.
Yes, Yo Sizwe. No, I think two things I'd like to answer, because I think there's a common thread in what Brother Kifense and Sister Tessa are raising around institutions. And I often challenge myself to think of institutions not as the kind of statute or creature by statute, but as the basic social laws and rules, whether formally or informally, that people have to relate to one another. And I think if you expand that definition, you realize that rules are not an institution static things. If I can give an example, our own automotive industrial policy, certainly since the late 60s, has made an assumption which I think under current conditions is a fatal assumption. So it's an assumption that you can assemble cars in South Africa and have an open market in the Eurozone, happy and willing to receive. Now that means you need a reform of your assumptions. You need to reform the assumptions that inform your instrument that you use to direct investment and direct economic activity in that space. So I think the view is institutional reform is a continuing thing. Other people would say maybe it's a continuing struggle. And I think that that's something that's quite important. The second one I want to maybe probably pick up on a bit more, because I think it's linked to the AFCFTA issue, is the issue that Dr. Abba raises. And I think part of it is as we think of national interest, we need to go back to what the DG was raising, Prazen, because in that document you mentioned of national interest, in page 29, it says, the expectation on diplomatic officials of the South African government is that when you are faced with a conflict or conflicting set of interests colliding, you need an objective evaluation of your environment. That's what that document says, and I'd encourage all of us to read it. Because what that means in the current context is to not even approach the AFCFTA with rose-tinted glasses. We as an institution are faced with the prospect in product markets of the competition being much, much closer. In isiXhosa we would say ukufa kusembizeni. In what sense? Almost some of the trade remedies we're seeing in glass, steel increasingly is of foreign investment into countries on the continent in anticipation for the AFCFTA in order to export surplus capital and to export inventories in order to reroute those into the South African market. Now, that's a part or the underbelly of the AFCFTA that we don't like to look at. And I think our job, in a context where everyone agitates in glowing terms about the AFCFTA, is to foreground these risks. We are in support of the AFCFTA. It has progressive roots. It's an important thing of expanding our market beyond just a 90 million strong customs union. But I think there are fundamental potential booby traps along the way that we have to be alive to and engage in a measured way. Maybe the last point, Dr. Abba asks whether this will spill over into hot conflict. I think it will spill over into hot conflict, but hot conflict by proxy, which unfolds in regionalized conflicts around particular choke points on trade. So let me give an example. 12% of global trade in merchandise goods flows through the Red Sea.
Coming back to you now from those talks. Those were our leading stories at this time, and your markets news is coming up just after the break with Nompu.